Welcome to a Brewmaster's Beginner's Guide. My name is Bowser the Healer, but today I'm Bowser the Tank. And this video is meant to be followed along. I'll have a talent build down below that you can import and follow along while I press some buttons with you and tell you how to play Brewmaster. I'm going to do my best to keep this updated during midnight. Some footage you'll see is from the War Within, some will be from midnight, and it's because I don't expect them to change a whole lot at this point. So I think this is a great time to make a beginner's guide and get you in. That being said, there is a table of contents down below if you're looking for a specific part of the video that you want to jump to. But feel free to just follow along the whole way, as it is meant in chronological order for beginners to follow along with. Also, if you like this kind of content, get subscribed, it would mean a lot to me. This is my full-time job, and the support has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, and let's dive into it. Now, what is Brewmaster? Brewmaster is the monk tank. It's all about dodging attacks, and anything that you don't dodge will hit you in the face and become staggered. Staggered damage is damage that you take split into damage over time. So yeah, some of it will go right into your health bar, but the rest of it will go into stagger. And as that damage over time is being dealt to you, you can clear that with Purifying Brew and Celestial Brews to keep yourself safe as you take that damage and continue shrugging off attacks. This actually makes it way more approachable than you might think. As a new tank player, sometimes the intimidating part of tanks are things like shield block and demon spikes, active mitigation tools that you need to have running when you take the damage so that you take less damage. However, with Brewmaster, you get punched in the face and you deal with it later. So to actually start mitigating, you run in and press your damage buttons and deal with the consequences of those actions later. It's quite fun, and I think it's more accessible than ever now at midnight. There's also significantly less buttons on it than before, and we have a few talent choices here to further reduce how many buttons you actually have to press. But part of the fun part about Brew is that there are a lot of tricks up your sleeve as well. So this tank is one that keeps delivering as you improve as a player, and I find it to be the most fun tank in the game, personally speaking. Now, I'd love to talk about stagger and all of the defensive sides of Brew, but I think the best way to start learning tank is to go through the damage rotation, as learning how the damage works will kind of exist the same in Mythic Plus, Raid, etc. And just note, this guide is more Mythic Plus oriented. However, all of the stuff you learn here is going to transfer to Raid just fine. But because that damage rotation is going to look so similar, let's start there and we'll move into defensives and how to pull in all of that stuff later. To start us off with damage, let's talk about Blackout Kick. This is a move that strikes a couple of targets. It's a single target move that cleaves. It doesn't hit everything in the room. It's a 4-second cooldown and it does a large amount of damage for you. But Blackout Kick is a very loaded move. We're going to be getting dodge chance. We're going to be reducing our stagger with this move. We're going to get a combo called a Blackout Kick combo to empower Tiger Palm or Keg Smash. It's going to do a million things, especially in your cooldown window. So for the most part, keeping this move on cooldown is the way to go. Blackout Kick also doesn't cost any energy. Our other moves will cost energy, so those moves that don't cost energy are a really nice button to go press while you're waiting for the energy to do a Tiger Palm or a Keg Smash. We're going to be referring to this move again and again and again, so make sure you have this one memorized and you know it's going to be coming up a lot. Next up on our list is Keg Smash. This is a 2-charge move with a relatively short cooldown, and it also can be cast from range. However, when I press this button, do note there's a lot of other things going on here, so we do need to talk about them. First things first, because of our hero talents, Keg Smash is a really strong single target button. It's always a good AoE attack, but it's very good for us in single target as well. Targets that are struck with Keg Smash will also be slowed by 20% for 15 seconds, and any target that's been hit by your Keg Smash is ready to be set on fire. More on that in a moment. Keg Smash will reduce your brew's cooldown, so if you do have a brew on cooldown and you throw a Keg Smash, you'll reduce that cooldown by a small amount. Your Blackout Kick combo, as in if you've hit Blackout Kick recently, your next Keg Smash will reduce the cooldowns even further. So a simple Blackout Kick into a Keg Smash will give us more time off of those cooldowns. This is great when you're trying to fight to get your defensives back. Keg Smash does cost a good chunk of energy, but it's basically always worth it. However, you might have saw all those attacks going off earlier. What's going on with that? Our hero talents give us flurry strike charges. When we auto attack a target, we start generating these flurry strikes. Now, you can get more from criticals and, you can get some bonus ones during your cooldown. However, the important part is that the next time you press Keg Smash, all of these will unleash. This means that if you're ever in a downtime with no energy and you're just auto attacking a mob, don't worry about it. Hit your Blackout Kick, maybe hit your Breath of Fire, and while you wait to hit Keg Smash, you're generating these flurry strikes, and you're going to do a lot more damage when they all release. That being said, it does stack all the way to 30 times. I don't know when you'll stack it all the way to 30 times, but it's very funny to watch all the attacks go off. You can act while these are going off, so you're not stuck while that's going on. You can input other actions while all that's happening. But this Flurry Strike thing is going to look very exciting, but it's just every time you press Keg Smash and a few other conditions that'll give you bonus ones we'll talk about later. Hit Keg Smash, you hit Flurry Strikes. It's a wonderful amount of extra damage, and it's a pretty enjoyable moment. This is why Keg Smash is one of our most important buttons, and my recommendation is to either keep it on cooldown or stay away from having 2 stacks for as long as possible, right? Sometimes you'll have 2 stacks, and that happens, but try to not have 2 stacks of Keg Smash whenever possible. Next up is our Tiger Palm. You're going to strike a single target for a large amount of damage. Now, the tooltip doesn't sound very strong, but there's like a million talents going on here. First of all, Face Palm is going to allow you to reduce the cooldown of your brews by 0.5 seconds when you Tiger Palm, and yes, 100% more damage. Then Counter Strike says that each time you dodge an enemy or an enemy misses you, your next Tiger Palm or Spinning Crane Kick deals 100% increased damage. We're never going to worry about the Spinning Crane Kick part, but this just means, yes, you're always dodging on Brewmaster, like almost all the time. If you watch any of the footage you'll see here, during like these examples, you'll notice that if you look at my frame, you'll see dodge show up all the damn time. So you're going to be constantly hitting very, very hard with your Tiger Palm. Tiger Palm also gets additionally increased by a Blackout Kick by 100%. So the Blackout combo is to hit Blackout Kick. Oh, I should probably target the mob. Blackout Kick into Tiger Palm. Now, you might be asking yourself, when do I hit Blackout Kick Tiger Palm versus Blackout Kick Keg Smash? Okay, I'll give you the advanced answer, but if you're new, just note that you can't get this one wrong. I think Keg Smash is a good one to go for if you're not sure what is better, because reducing your brew cooldowns is, for the most part, a great way to get started on Brewmaster. However, technically speaking, if you're in single target or there's a priority target that needs to die, hitting your Blackout Kick into Tiger Palm is always a better option. So get your Keg Smashes on cooldown, hit your Blackout Kicks, and always put the Blackout combo into Tiger Palm for technically more damage. But there are scenarios where I need to live and I'm more focused on my survival, in which case it's not worth going for the Tiger Palm. It is very much worth going for that Keg Smash. And just while we're on the topic, note that after you hit Blackout combo, you can press other buttons just fine, right? It doesn't matter. Your Blackout combo remains and will be used the next time you activate an attack that does trigger your Blackout combo, which is just Tiger Palm and Keg Smash. So it's not too hard to learn. And if you're like, oh man, I'm worried about it, just keep hitting Blackout Kick and you're going to get the bonus from your Tiger Palm or from your Keg Smash, and it doesn't have to be too big of a deal. Next up on our list is Fire Breath. This is a 15-second cooldown that does get reset every single time that you throw Keg Smash. Now, this does fire damage to targets in front of you, and note that it will breathe like 3 times with our talent, so if you're wondering why there's multiple things of fire coming out of you, that's very normal. Now, if you set the target on fire, they'll do 5% less damage to you, but, you know, they have to be able to be set on fire. Throw your Keg Smash to get enemies wet with your brews, and then you can set them on fire. Targets that are on fire will have that damage resist on them, and they'll be taking some damage over time. Fire Breath is a good amount of damage, but it's not your most important button unless you're in cooldowns, and I'll explain why that is later. However, Fire Breath is a nice amount of damage reduction, and of course good for helping with that initial threat, and being a no energy cost move, you'll likely be able to rotate into it after spending your energy on things like Tiger Palms and Keg Smashes. Now, if you hear 5% damage reduction and go, is that really worth it? Yeah, it actually is. Brewmaster has less health than other tanks, and the reason is that stagger is the most powerful defensive effect in the game. Again, I mentioned it earlier in the video, but that's why Preservation Evoker gives out stagger as their defensive, and it's regarded as one of the best defenses in the game. So because you're staggering damage, that 5% is doing a ton of work for you, and that you take 5% less damage, and then a portion of that is already getting staggered, so even less damage is hitting your face. This is why when we get to our major defensive of Fortify Brew, you get 20% bonus health and you take 20% less. That is a large amount of defensive for Brewmaster. For other tanks, right, shield wall and whatnot, 40% defensive, yeah, that's pretty powerful, but you don't need it on Brew. Now, there's a choice note on our tree here for Special Delivery and Rushing Jade Wind. I'm going to set you off with Special Delivery as I think it's more useful, easier to play, and one less button you have to manage. But when they're balanced correctly, Rushing Jade Wind and Special Delivery are even in value. However, just note that special delivery as of recording this video is performing better, so I'm going to recommend that you use special delivery, but let's talk about Rushing Jade Wind. Rushing Jade Wind is a no energy cost move with like a 5-something second cooldown. I think it's hasted, and when this is running, you have a little tornado around you doing damage. This is incredibly useful for snap threat. So if you were to run over some mobs with that running with, say, like spinning crane kick, you'll get a lot of immediate aggro on those targets, which will help you at the start of a pull. However, you have to keep pressing Rushing Jade Wind, like all the time. And it's okay if it falls off, but you're going to want to get it back running as soon as you have the open global cooldown to do so. This means it's one extra button. And if you want more complexity in Brewmaster, I don't know if Rushing Jade Wind is the way to go. I think actually go check out Master of Harmony, as there's more interaction points in here if you're looking to sauce up your Brewmaster play. However, if you do love this talent or it's performing exceptionally well at some point, feel free to run it, as it's still a pretty good time. And also having another no energy button does feel nice in your rotation. Now, special delivery is a very goofy move. I'm going to read it to you and then I'll attempt to show you it. Drinking from your brews has a 100% chance to toss a keg high into the air that lands nearby after 3 seconds, dealing a large amount of physical damage to all enemies within 8 yards and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. It's about as Looney Tunes and as goofy as you think it is. I'll zoom out for you, but anytime you stop dodging. Anytime you press one of your brews, you launch that keg flying into the air. Yes, and it's possible to launch a lot of these back to back to back. Not that I recommend you spend all of your cooldowns to throw kegs in the air, but it's insanely goofy. It does attempt to find like the center of enemies, but like that also means that like when I'm here sometimes, it'll send the barrel, as you see, like that way. So sometimes it'll go off to Turbo Narnia, and if you don't know why your barrel's being launched to Turbo Narnia, that's typically why. However, special delivery is very easy to optimize. In lower damage pulls, you can just use 1 to 2 purifying brews if nothing really hurts to just get some extra damage in. In high damage pulls where everything hurts, trust me, you're going to be pressing it all the time. I'll have some footage on screen here of what that looks like, but no, seriously, you're pressing this button all the time anyway. So you're going to be getting all this extra damage from your brews. It's very nice. It's passive. Just note that you don't see this damage at the start of a pull, because if you throw a keg into the air because you drank a brew and you're still collecting mobs, it might not actually land on any mobs if you're still moving. Just keep that in mind. But once you have everything settled, it'll be doing a whole lot of damage for you in the background. Next up on our list is Spinning Crane Kick. This is a relatively expensive energy cost move that lets you spin around and do damage around you. While this channel is going off, by the way, you are capable of taking other actions, such as your interrupt. However, Spinning Crane Kick on Brewmaster isn't a great move, and I'm not going to recommend that you press it very often outside of some unbelievably niche scenarios, but it is very useful at the start of a pull, as I mentioned earlier with Rushing Jade Wind. So even without Rushing Jade Wind, I want you to run up to the pull and Spinning Crane Kick. Maybe you throw a keg smash at them, then you Spinning Crane Kick to get their attention, and then move to another pack of mobs. Spinning Crane Kick is a great way to start gathering mobs. Now, if your DPS start blasting without any regard for you, they'll likely rip off of you from just spinning crane kicks. So sometimes I like to weave in a fire breath or something like that there just to get some damage rolling while I hit that spinning crane kick. And that's why a keg smash helps a lot too. But spinning crane kick is useful for that reason. However, unless there's a mathematician that's done the math on this, I don't know when you press spinning crane kick ever. Because yes, if you've dodged recently, it can do 100% more damage because of the talent Counter-Strike. But man, I don't know when that becomes actually worth pressing in higher target counts. So thus, if somebody wants to do the math on that, great, but I don't know if it's ever worth it over Keg Smash. So I'm going to recommend you press Keg Smash once the mobs are all grouped up nicely in front of you. Now it's finally time to talk about our cooldowns. The first cooldown to talk about is Exploding Keg. This 1 minute cooldown throws a giant fiery keg that blows up, dealing fire damage, causing your attacks against those targets to deal 1,000-something additional fire damage from this tooltip, and melee attacks from the targets afflicted do 100% reduced damage, all in the next 3 seconds. It also gives you a reset on Keg Smash, so you'll get one more charge back after using this. This means that the simple thing to tell you is to press Keg Smash before you hit Exploding Keg. Nice and easy there. However, we have to talk about this move. First things first, the defensive side of this isn't a big deal. Don't try to use this as a defensive, as you're mostly going to be using it to do damage or to get threat on mobs that are maybe grouped up and you want to absolutely confirm you have threat on them. You could use this in your cooldowns for more damage, but because it only offers one more keg smash worth of flurry strikes and breath of fire resets, it's only so good in your cooldown window. So the answer is, feel free to send this in a cooldown, but realistically, more is more. So throw your exploding keg and hit things with it. Next up, you do heal from fire damage, so the breath of fires on the targets and the exploding keg hitting the target will give you a good chunk of healing as well. But also, the travel time on this move is terrible, and I just need this to be known for any new Brewmaster players. If you want to throw at a far distance, it's going to take a second to get there, and that can and will ruin Christmas for you at one point or another. So I highly recommend you think about where you're throwing that exploding keg. However, it does explode much faster if it's done right by your feet. But exploding keg, more is more. Now, if you're running the other set of hero talents, I believe Niazao here is a 2-minute proper, and you can always get an exploding keg inside and outside of that window. However, again, I don't think that's really worth the optimization. For those of you who've played Brewmaster in the past, we no longer have weapons of order, meaning we're not stacking a debuff for damage, which would make exploding keg hit significantly harder. So that's why it's not so much of a big deal anymore, as one more keg smash is some more damage, but it's nothing to, really write home about. So if it does line up nicely, use them together. Otherwise, don't worry about it, more is more. Next up is Niazao. This is our major cooldown, the big offensive and defensive cooldown that you'll be using to do crazy pulls and crazy damage. Now, it's a 1.6 minute cooldown because of hero talents, and it's got a lot of hero talent interaction with Shadow Pun, so we're going to be talking about this for a minute. You summon an effigy of Niazao the Black Ox for 25 seconds that attacks your primary target and stomps when you cast Blackout Kick, damaging all nearby enemies. This is part of the reason why hitting Blackout Kick is so important in your cooldown window, and just in general. But when you hit Blackout Kick in this window, you're just going to be getting more damage out of Niazao. Now, if you've played Brewmaster in the past, this is no longer affected by stagger whatsoever. Niazao is just going to be pumping alongside you. However, 40% of the damage you're staggering is actually going to be taken by Niazao. And Niazao is healed for 100% of your purified stagger when you use your purifying brew, which we'll be going over in a little bit. I've never seen Niazao die, ever. So if that happens, something horrible happened, or you literally never pressed your active mitigation tool. Now, there's a lot more going on here. First of all, when Niazao is out, typically speaking, a lot of builds will grab this and you'll get 5% flatline extra mastery, and then when Niazao's out, you'll be getting 10% extra mastery, which is great for dodging attacks. Furthermore, you're going to get flurry strikes when you press the button. When you activate Niazao, you're going to get 10 stacks of flurry strikes that trigger on your next attack at 70% effectiveness. And then to add to that, invoke Niazao the Black Ox causes Breath of Fire to launch 9 flurry strikes. This makes our cooldown a little confusing, and I will be going over this rotation again later, but my recommendation is when you're ready to pop Niazao, I honestly think the best course of action is to make sure you've already thrown a keg smash so that you can set enemies on fire. However, it looks something like this. I'm going to throw a keg smash, I'm going to hit Niazao, I'm going to hit Blackout Kick, I'm going to set them on fire, I'm going to throw keg smash, I'm going to set them on fire, I'm going to hit exploding keg, I'm going to hit keg smash, I'm going to hit Blackout Kick, I'm going to set them on fire, I'm going to hit keg smash, I'm going to hit breath of fire, and then I'm going to hit Blackout Kick. And you kind of just do this and you find a nice little rhythm as you go, but that can be a little confusing. I said a lot of words very quickly there. So my recommendation here is to make sure you keep hitting those breath of fires for all of those flurry strikes. Keep hitting keg smash after you've pressed breath of fire to reset its cooldown, and just try to keep that Blackout Kick on cooldown. The opener is messy. Some of the footage you'll see, I actually will mess it up. And that's because in the heat of a moment while you're popping defensive, gathering mobs, interrupting things, you might mess it up. Like, girl, it is a lot, so don't worry about it. Have fun with it. But the more you can hit Blackout Kick, the more you can hit Breath of Fire, which means the more you can hit keg smash to reset Breath of Fire, the better your life will be. And if you're wondering how you fit the exploding keg in there, listen, as long as you are missing a charge of keg smash, you're ready to press explosive keg. It's an exploding keg. I keep changing how I'm calling it, but exploding keg will just give you another keg smash. So if it does line up in your windows, I recommend just popping it to get another keg smash to get another Breath of Fire reset. And that's all there is to it. I say casually, there is a lot going on here, but Niazao is one of your best defensives. Now, you don't really want to overlap your major defensive fortifying brew. I'll be going over this move in greater detail later, but because Niazao is such a powerful defensive helping take your stagger, realistically, if you can avoid hitting major defenses while Niazao's out, you'll get more mileage out of those moves. Granted, sometimes it's the end of the world and you're taking too much damage, and Fortify Brew and Yazao both need to be active at the same time. But because with cooldowns, you typically want to have 80 to 90% effective uptime with them, typically 100, right? But you're not pressing this at the end of a pull, you're going to press it at the start of a pull. And the start of a pull is the highest amount of damage that you're likely going to take in the pull. This is why it's such a good idea to open with Yazao once the mobs are all nice and gathered, because then later in the pull, if the going is still getting rough, you can pop the Fortify Brew and really hold on quite a bit longer. So try to stagger those out the best you can. When you're learning a new spec, I highly recommend you go back and reread all of your popular talents, all the things that people are taking. The reason is that you'll just learn more of the inner workings of your spec. For instance, this talent here I mentioned briefly, Walk with the Ox. Your damaging abilities have an increased chance to invoke Yazao, causing him to charge to your target's location and stomp, dealing physical damage to your target and reduce damage to secondary targets. This is a nice ability, but it will explain why you sometimes see an Ox bolt into the pull and do some damage. Now you understand, oh, what causes that? Attacks do. Oh, so just about anything I do can proc that. Ah, that's pretty important to know. Or not so important to know, but now you at least know why it's happening. Go and make sure you read your talents as you become more familiar with specs. It's a very important part of the learning process. That being said, we've already covered some of these. Flurry strikes are charged up by doing auto attacks. You're going to get some of them from critical strike chance, giving you even more. You're going to get some bonus ones when you pop Yazao. You're going to get some other bonus ones when you Breath of Fire during Yazao. Very powerful stuff. There's also some critical scalers here. Blackout Kick deals an additional 30% critical damage, which is a pretty big deal. But one of my favorites, when you dodge or parry an attack, reduce all damage taken by 10% for the next 6 seconds. Predictive Training is a really powerful defensive talent, and part of the reason I like Shadowpawn so much for new players. Yeah, Flurry Strikes isn't the hardest thing to optimize, it's a lot less buttons, it's pretty passive, right? But this also keeps you a little bit tankier without having to worry so much about juggling your other defensives, which is why it's so good for the new player. Not that a new player can't enjoy Master of Harmony, just that I think Shadowpawn's a really good place to start. When these two are close in power, Master of Harmony is a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you check it out, but it does have more interacting points for you to consider. So I want you to give it a try at some point, maybe read through it, but if you don't want to work harder right now for learning a tank, Shadowpawn keeps it easy, and it is my preferred playstyle. Like, I love Master of Harmony, but Shadowpawn's my favorite. Now let's talk about these Apex talents, as you might not have these if you're watching this during the War Within, but you'll be having them soon. This is a 4-point node, and you basically, I'm stuck in combat, but essentially you get the ranks in sequential order. So as you put points into here, you're going to get rank 1, rank 2, and then rank 3 after you spend all 4 points. Bring me another. Drinking a brew has a 20% chance to leave you with an empty barrel, which is tossed along with your next keg smash to deal physical damage to your target, ricocheting up to 4 times at 80% effectiveness. It does quite literally bounce across enemies' heads, very Looney Tunes style, very cartoonish, it's very fun. And the empty barrel does get a separate icon as well, so you'll know when you have one ready. The second one is the 2-pointer. Gaining an empty barrel resets the cooldown of keg smash and makes its next cost 100% less energy. Physical damage dealt is also increased by 20%. And I do think that's all of your physical damage is increased. I don't think that's exclusive to empty barrel. And then the final rank, and this is maybe the most optional, I think you should take it, but if you're really starved for another point for something, you might be able to steal it from this last one. When you cast Fortifying Brew or Celestial Infusion, you tap a fresh keg, granting yourself and 2 nearby allies a refreshing drink, leaving you with an empty barrel. Empty barrels deal 100% increased damage, and refreshing drink upon taking damage automatically consume a refreshing drink to heal 90,000 over 8 seconds. Now, for context, I'm 280 item level, 680, oh my god, 280 item level. I don't think I have a scaler in the beta right now. No, I don't. So at 280 item level, I have 636,000 health, right? That means that I'm going to be healing for almost 1/6 of my health or so with refreshing drink. While this is good natural passive healing for yourself, what I really like about it is that it is going to probably, if I had to guess, smart heal some allies nearby, giving you a little bit more of a support role when you're in the middle of doing your own tanking. Sometimes you can heal other other teammates of yours. You can tell I pug a lot. You can heal your teammates with Brewmaster when you don't need to heal yourself. However, sometimes you got to focus all of your heals into you. This allows you to heal not only yourself but other people passively while blasting and doing damage. Very similar to After the Wildfire on Guardian Druid, except it's based on poppin' kegs. popping a fresh keg, Fortify Brew, and Celestial Infusion. And your Celestial Brew is up pretty often, so you'll be doing this quite a few times. And your Fortify being your big defensive means that when you pop your big defensive, you will also always get this guaranteed healing. Before we talk about rotations, both non-cooldown and cooldown, and go over some of the information that we learned during all of this, I need to get this out of the way. This isn't going to be completely optimal. The reason is that you might be watching this at a weird part of midnight where maybe things have changed, maybe certain moves have gotten more powerful, and what I say is going to be inaccurate. However, just note that this should get you on the right foot. I'm a healer main, then I play tank, then I play DPS. And for me, getting the damage good enough, or more than good enough, is the most important part of tanking, because living and keeping threat are the two most important jobs that you have. So I highly recommend that you focus on doing good damage, but don't get tripped up about being perfect, because realistically, perfect is the murderer of good enough, and good enough is going to keep the party alive and have you absolutely cranking as a brewmaster. If you do struggle with any of the performance anxiety parts of tanking, by the way, because I'm mentioning it here, I'm going to mention again later as well, I do have a video all about performance anxiety and just all about tanking in general. So if the general flow of tanking makes you a little bit nervous, I highly recommend watching those videos, as they should help you with that. Tanking is a lot of responsibility, but I also think it's super fun. And once you get over that initial barrier, I think it's a blast. And it's also the easiest thing in the game to practice, because you can get the most amount of practical testing on tank. That being said, let's start going through the rotation. First things first, while you're pulling mobs, I highly recommend using Spinning Crane Kick, maybe some Breath of Fires and some Keg Smashes, just to get things angry at you and looking at you and not other people. I also will be going over this button later, but your taunt will generate extra threat against that target by 800% for 6 seconds. However, we take a talent called Hasty Provocation that's going to make the target 50% faster. This has some wonderful applications, but have you ever seen a mob, like a caster, that doesn't start immediately in a pull by casting? They walk for a moment, and then they stand still and start casting? Well, now they're going to go a whole 50% something further, because you taunted them and they sprinted towards you. I cannot tell you how many times that has made pulling mobs easier. And remember, if there's something big and scary in the pull that you want to make sure is looking at you, make sure to hit your taunt so that it's looking at you and generate some extra threat on that target to make your life a little bit easier. That being said, Spinning Crane Kick is the way to start the pulls. Use some of your other buttons to get mobs angry at you, and then feel free to dash around to another pack of enemies and start getting them angry at you too. Once the mobs are all settled and nice together for you, then it's time to start your rotation. My recommendation is try to get Blackout Kick on cooldown, but if it's not on cooldown yet, you can do it second. Get your first Keg Smash out of the way. Hit your Blackout Kick, set them on fire. Then keep hitting your Keg Smashes. When there's nothing left to press for Keg Smash, you can then start transitioning to Tiger Pumps. If you're on the priority target, the big scary thing you want to kill, hitting Blackout Kicks into Tiger Palm is a really good deal. Fire Breath is not a high priority move, but you can refresh it whenever you have a free global cooldown, because outside of your cooldown window, it's just nice to keep it rolling. And you do heal from some of your fire damage, so using it as a method of starting your healing isn't a bad idea either. And that's all there is to it. Right? As you take damage, you'll pop your brews and your special deliveries will go flying, and the bouncing kegs that you get from an empty barrel will also happen as you take damage, and they don't really change anything. It just means that you're going to be pressing Keg Smash more, and we love hitting Keg Smash in this household. Remember that we do have an Apex talent that says that when we excuse me, let me get it wrong, getting an empty barrel resets the cooldown of Keg Smash and makes it cost 100% less energy. This makes it super high priority to go smack that button and get one of those kegs out there again. But yeah, keep hitting Keg Smash, keep hitting Blackout Kick, have some fun. The optimization for Blackout Combo into Tiger Palm will exist. However, the most of your optimization is going to come from your cooldowns. So let's go through that one more time. We're going to assume that we have Exploding Keg up. To go over this again, Exploding Keg isn't a big deal to have in your cooldown window. However, it does provide one additional Keg Smash. So when you don't have any Keg Smashes left and you're in your cooldown window, simply press Exploding Keg to get another Keg Smash and launch it at enemies to do more flurry striking and get your Breath of Fire off of cooldown. Remember that Fire Breath or Breath of Fire, because I'm an Evoker player and I keep calling it Fire Breath. Your Breath of Fire is going to unleash flurry strikes during your Nyazao cooldown. And remember that popping Nyazao is also going to give you a bunch of flurry strikes. But because flurry strikes will strike all of the targets around you, it's very important that you make sure all of the mobs are nice and organized before you press it. once you start getting all the mobs together, if you haven't watched my tanking tutorial, just start walking backwards a little bit. Backpedaling is one of the nicest ways to get mobs to kind of shuffle in for you, but don't wait too long. It's time to press our buttons. My recommendation is to always start by throwing a keg smash, hit Nizao, hit your stomp, hit your breath of fire, throw another keg smash. Feel free to use your exploding keg once that's happened, set them on fire, throw another keg smash, keep hitting blackout kick, and keep this rhythm up, making sure breath of fire is staying on cooldown, you're hitting blackout kick as often as possible, and keg smash on cooldown whenever you've breath of fired recently. If you haven't breath of fired, make sure to do that first. Towards the end of your Nizao window, Nizao desummons and you won't get the flurry strikes anymore on your breath of fire. That might throw you off. So if there's only like 1 second left, it might be like too late to get more flurry strikes out with your breath of fire, but that's not an optimization you really have to worry about making a mistake with. Now, feel free to watch that segment back again and again, because it is a lot of moving parts, and you're gonna get messy in a pull and like mess up the order. Try not to fear those moments. It's more important that you're getting those flurry strikes out and you're getting threat on the targets, and once things have started being on cooldown, you're gonna hit that rhythm and get the rest of your damage down. So don't ever worry about it too much. Now, final rotation things. We mentioned it earlier, but your blackout combo. The optimal way to use your blackout combo is that unless you need to get brews back in order to survive, it's almost always worth going for tiger palms into the priority target. If you don't know much about priority target, I don't want to bore you in the beginner's guide with it, but essentially let's pretend one mob has more health than the rest of them, like this one I'm targeting in the center of this pack. That is the priority target. If it has 20% more HP than everything else, then we want to actually put all of our tiger palms and priority damage into that mob. And the reason is, the more time the party stays in single target, the slower we go. Single target's the worst damage profile in the game, right? We're only hitting one target. That's the weakest amount of damage we can do. So if we spend less time stuck in single target, we go faster. So whenever you get the opportunity, this is great for healers too, by the way, if you play healer on the side. Whenever you can do damage, if you can do damage to the highest health target to try to even out those health bars, that's going to do a ton of work for you and your team. That being said, if you get nervous about all the tabbing and targeting you have to do, don't worry about it at the beginning. But your blackout combo going into your tiger palm more often than your keg smash is very good for boss damage and for priority target damage. So if something absolutely needs to die in a dungeon, you can optimize that. But if this does sound intimidating, optimize it later. You're still going to be doing plenty of damage by just hitting the buttons and getting them on cooldown, so I don't want you to overthink these interactions if it sounds intimidating. Also, real quick, before we move on to the next section, what about that special delivery? Okay, so I'll say this again. If the pull doesn't hurt, like right now I'm not taking that much damage, feel free to just use all of your brews to your heart's content to do some extra damage. There's nothing wrong with that. You will get extra damage. However, you don't want to be on the floor dead because you used all of your purifying brew charges. We'll be going over that in a second, but my recommendation is just keep purifying brew at 1 charge. Whenever it hits its second charge, right, feel free to spend it again and do some extra damage. That's a great way to play it if you want to be kind of safe, but you don't want to overthink it. But yeah, there is the ability to press all of your brews, reset your brews, press all of your brews, press your fortifying brew, and do as much damage as humanly possible. But I don't know when that's useful, because realistically you might just die. However, if it's life or death, like the timer in the dungeon, it's going to be close and you need to get as much damage as possible, you can empty the cellar. Just get rid of all of your cooldowns and do as much damage as possible. That's fine. Listen, a good desperation tactic is important. I just don't want you doing that in like your first plus 10 of the season to midnight and you just die instantaneously and your healer's like, what's wrong with you? Because that'll be 100% on you. But it is really fun to empty the cellar. Also note, there is a talent called Empty the Cellar. I'm not referring to that. Now it's time to talk about active mitigation. And mitigation in general, defensives, all of that good stuff. Let's start with the mastery on Brewmaster, Elusive Brawler. Each time you are hit by a melee attack or hit with blackout kick, you gain a stacking mastery percentage increased dodge chance until your next successful dodge. It also increases your attack power by mastery plus something whatever percentage. Here's the thing with your mastery. We're not going to be statting around your mastery very much. It's actually going to be one of your lower stats a good amount of the time. However, that's not a bad thing, because you're always going to be dodging anyway. This just means you'll be dodging more. The blackout kick side of this is pretty important, as you do have some talents that state that when you land a blackout kick, and it's a critical, you end up getting another stack of elusive brawlers. So you can get 2 very quickly. Also, depending on your stagger level, you can get up to 15% increased mastery baseline. When you consider that we also have the 5% down here that's doubled when Yazao is out, even without a whole lot of mastery, you're dodging all the damn time. But then, to make matters even better, you do have drinking a brew grants you 10% dodge for 5 seconds. So if you've been mitigating damage, you'll be dodging more as well. Next up is stagger and shuffle. I'm on this talent because it shows both stagger and shuffle sounds like it's going to be complicated. It's very easy to understand. Beginning with stagger, you shrug off attacks, delaying a portion of physical damage based on your agility, instead taking it over 10 seconds. It affects magical attacks at a 58% effectiveness, so if you're getting bolted by magical attacks, it'll be going to your face more so than it would if it was a physical attack. You gain up to 15% mastery based on your current level of stagger, which we just went over. Stagger is the bread and butter of Brewmaster survivability. Now, shuffle makes it 100% stronger. How do you get shuffle? By hitting blackout kick, keg smash, and spinning crane kick. Listen, you're going to get so much shuffle time that you're never going to even think about this. You're going to be hitting spinning crane kick, pulling mobs, and you won't even realize that you've gained or lost shuffle. Shuffle's just kind of here, I think, to make it so you can't genuinely stand still in a pull and like go to the bathroom or something. Like, you do actually need to be pressing your buttons in order to survive. That being said, whenever you gain 3 seconds of shuffle time, you'll purify 5% of your staggered damage, so you're incentivized to be moving through your rotation effectively to further reduce all of your stagger. This isn't a huge amount, but Quick Sip does get some work done for you, so it's important to at least know what's removing that stagger, but realistically, shuffle is the passive, stagger is the thing that you're always dealing with. You also have a stagger bar here, right below your energy gauge. If it's green, that means that it's tickling. If it's yellow, that means it's starting to hurt. And at red, you're certainly going to want to start mitigating it. Now, it says it goes up to 100%, and while that is technically true, I'll have some footage on screen here, it can go well above 100%. And when it does, you're going to hit your purifying brew to remove 50% of your stagger. We'll be talking all about that in just a second. Well, if you're at 200% stagger and you clear it, you'll still be at 100% stagger. So when you see red, that's usually bad, but you can be at extremely high levels of stagger and be still cleansing it and not seeing it drop very far down. There's a few other methods of clearing stagger, and we'll go over those in time. But if you're a little bit worried about it, Zen State says that the effectiveness of your stagger is increased by up to 20% based on your missing health. So when the going gets rough, you'll actually hold on a lot longer than you think. I was getting a bunch of footage for this video in an Algathar Academy by myself, and you can see that like there's some low HP scenarios that I should not be surviving, and you can hold on a lot longer than you might think because of Zen State. So never give up with your stagger, and it's important to feel it out and learn how it works. Another important part about stagger is that stagger can never kill you, and furthermore, stagger gets dealt back into your health bar as normal damage. Now, this doesn't go into your armor or anything like that, but I do think it goes back into your defenses, but it certainly goes back into things like shields you might have. And because you're healing up your own health bar, right, after you've purified some of the stagger and then you heal back up, you've essentially kind of like tossed out some of the extra damage you would have been taking. It's a very fun mechanic, and it always comes through as a steady stream of damage. So if you've taken a large amount of damage, you're about to be dealt a large amount of damage over time. It isn't weird and like it delivers the damage as it was dealt to you. No, it just kind of says, okay, you've taken this much damage, this much is staggered, this is what your damage over time is. If it sounds confusing, just feel it out. I promise you, stagger makes a whole lot of sense. It's way more sensible to feel it out than for me to attempt to explain it, because it really is just a very, oh, I see how this works kind of thing once you start taking damage and clearing it. So let's actually talk about how we clear it. Purifying brew. This is the main method of clearing your staggered damage, and it's very important to note that this is, like a lot of active mitigation tools, off the global cooldown. So you can be in the middle of your global cooldown and still pop purifying brew. So you'll see I'm pressing other buttons and I can still act. And that's a pretty important part of purifying brew. Purifying brew clears 50% of your staggered damage, or a minimum of 8% of your maximum life. What makes purifying brew interesting is that we have a couple of talents working with it, but it really does cut half of the bar, which is very, very useful. Again, your stagger bar can be double or triple the size that you can actually see here. You can be at a 200 or 300% stagger. Not that it will display here, but hitting purifying brew will still cut that in half. This is very useful because 25% of the damage we stagger is healed to us. So if you're healing massive amounts of damage from your stagger, it's going to be playing into your survivability quite nicely. So if you're curious why you're healing so much, this is a large portion of extra healing that you'll be receiving. It's also important to note, you have a passive called Celestial Fortune. You have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to be healed for an additional 70% of the amount healed, which is a really, really fat amount of healing. So whenever you're receiving healing, there's this chance that it just becomes an even bigger heal, which is incredibly useful. Purifying Brew is the first line of defense, and feel it out, but you're basically going to be waiting for your bar to go red and the damage to really start hurting to start chugging the Purifying Brew, as it's technically more effective the more damage you're taking. So once you think you're at the point where the pull really starts to hurt, you can start chugging that Purifying Brew to get the most amount of value out of it. And one final note before we move to our next move, remember all these moves that are called Brew are getting cooled down by Keg Smash, so you can get your Purifying Brew back even quicker with some Blackout Kick combo Keg Smashes or just hitting Keg Smash in general. Now we have Celestial Infusion. Note that this is a choice node shared with Celestial Brew, and they're very similar. They're going to shield you for an amount. The amount right now with my current item level is 73,399. However, Celestial Brew, it's just a shield that sits on top of your health bar. Celestial Infusion absorbs 30% of incoming damage up to that amount, the 73,000 amount you see here. So what does that mean? It means that Celestial Brew is just a true proper shield, meaning all of your stagger damage and everything is going to go right back into it. And Celestial Infusion ensures that you're still taking damage, but you're actually mitigating that damage. I think mathematically that does make Celestial Infusion a little more practical in Mythic Plus and in a lot of scenarios, but only in kind of a niche way. If you don't know what you're doing here, Celestial Infusion's nice and easy. You'll still be taking damage, but you'll be mitigating some of that damage. Celestial Brew does have its uses, and if you know enough about Brew to know where that goes, or you just prefer the way it feels, feel free to go for it. They're both going to be performing well regardless, so take your pick here. Now it's time for me to talk about Touch of Death. This is an offensive move, and you're going to be wondering why it's here. I'll explain. Touch of Death is a 1.5 minute cooldown with the way I have you talented, and you'll instantly deal damage equal to 100% of your maximum health to the target. However, it's only usable on creatures that have less health than you. Now there is a talent that lets you pop this earlier, which you can go for. However, what I like about this is it reduces delayed stagger damage by 200% of damage dealt. Let's say you're in a pull and there's a lot of enemies and you're taking a ton of damage, but one of them is low. Click on that enemy and try to get them in range of Touch of Death. Then kill the target. It should basically clear your stagger every single time. Now, I have had more than a few bugs where it has absolutely not cleared my stagger, and also it heals us for the damage dealt, 50% of the damage dealt due to a talent we have here, Chi Transfer. And sometimes that doesn't work either. I don't know if this is a bug. I don't know if there's a certain class of enemy and the way it dies, it doesn't satisfy that condition, therefore not give it to you. But when the going gets rough, you probably can kill the target with Touch of Death and save your own life. I'm a big fan of this. I wanted to let you know that it exists, but it can be a bit buggy in my current testing, so just be warned. Don't overly rely on that tactic, but if you can execute the tactic, it is so much fun to get it off. Before we move into our larger cooldowns, remember that Breath of Fire from targets that have been recently Keg Smashed will in fact set on fire and deal 5% less damage to you. And I want to say it again in case you missed it in the earlier section, but remember, our damage reduction values seem kind of low, but that's because stagger is so unbelievably powerful that it would be kind of broken if it wasn't. That 5% DR is going very far for you, so please make sure you're using it. It will absolutely help when the going gets rough. Now, let's talk about the next big defensive in the first line of defense, Black Ox Brew. Black Ox Brew is a 2-minute cooldown, which will instantly refill your energy, your Purifying Brew charges, and reset the cooldown of your Celestial Brew. Like I said, if you need to empty the cellar and use this to do a whole lot of damage in an emergency, go for it, but I don't want to see any of you use this to refill your energy bar. If I hear that you refilled your energy bar with this, oh, you're in trouble with me. That being said, when the going gets rough and you're taking a lot of damage, your Black Ox Brew is a great way to just kind of keep yourself alive. And remember, just mathematically, let's say you had 400% stagger. Well, what's 50% of that? Well, 200%. What's 50% of that? 100%. What's 50% of that? 50% stagger. Yeah, that's a lot of healing and a lot of stagger cleared. So drinking both your Purifying Brews, hitting your Celestial, popping your Black Ox Brew, and then drinking your Purifying Brews again is a great tactic for surviving something insane. But do note, you don't want to overlap your Celestial Brew, so once you see the shield go away on your health bar, feel free to pop it again or when things start to hurt. But because this has Brew in the name, your Keg Smashes are reducing its cooldown. So it's actually more like a 1 minute, 1 minute 15 cooldown when in the middle of combat. So you're going to get it up more often than you think. So if things are hurting, go to your Black Ox brew first because you'll likely get it off cooldown the next time you need it. If you need something significantly chunkier, Fortifying Brew's got you covered. This 4-minute cooldown will turn turn your skin to stone for 15 seconds, increasing your current maximum health by 20% and reducing all damage you take by 20%. Can you imagine if it turned your stone to skin? That'd be awful. Anyway, 20% increased health and 20% reduced damage is significant on Brewmaster. You're going to see it in some of the gameplay I show, and you're going to feel it when you press it. It doesn't make you immortal, but damn, it makes it very hard for you to die. Fortifying Brew, again, you can reduce this cooldown to roughly like a 2-minute, 32-minute cooldown with keg smashes and frequent uses of them, but this is really your last bastion of defense. If it's the end of the world and you're gonna die, Fortifying Brew can have you hold on just a bit longer. Now, you don't want to send this with Niuzao. Now you can, especially if it's the end of the world, but the reason I recommend against it is that, as I said when talking about Niuzao earlier, Niuzao is going to take 40% of the damage you're staggering for himself. This means that you're going to survive a lot better with Niuzao out on the field. Let your healer be cranking and you be doing as much damage as possible while Niuzao's out. If the pull hurts after Niuzao goes away, then the Fortifying Brew can become a tempting option to keep you going if the damage is still really high. There aren't a lot of scenarios where I think you're sending both of them, but there might be some unbelievable giga pulls and maybe something becomes really popular in one of the dungeons. Maybe the Algathar plant pull for Season 1 of Midnight is going to happen, and you do want some major defensives while you start that pull, but realistically, a lot of the times try to keep them separate to get the most amount of value out of them. Exploding Keg is a defensive cooldown, but because I don't think the 3 seconds of 100% reduced melee damage is all that important, use this when you're setting up and doing large amounts of damage, and it'll cover you for a couple of seconds. The fire damage it provides will also heal you for quite a lot, so it is a useful move, but I'm rarely, if ever, saving Exploding Keg as a defensive. Now, there might be a niche scenario where that's a good idea, but leave that to you when you're better at the spec and you know the dungeons or the raids super well, and you know a perfect place for that Exploding Keg to go. Sure, send it. But it's good to know it has a defensive property, but I'm going to advise that you don't worry about it like a defensive until it's absolutely necessary for your ability to prog. Now it's time to finally talk healing. Let's start with Vivify. Vivify is the basic monk heal. It'll heal you for an amount. It's a 1.3 second cast time with my current GCD. Cool. Here's the thing, and it will activate this bouncing little orb called Chi Wave, but I ain't talking about that right now. You can't parry, block, or dodge while channeling. So you're rarely, if ever, going to be hard casting this move. However, because of a talent we have, Vivication, when you press Keg Smash, your next Vivify will be instant cast and cost 70% less energy, which is basically almost energy neutral after the global cooldown has concluded. So your first line of self-healing, every time you've Keg Smashed, you have about 20 seconds to pop that self-heal. And remember, you can get bonus healing from Celestial Fortune. You could crit and just get a very large heal on yourself. You can then get a crit and Celestial Fortune and get a lot out of this. It's not going to feel like a whole lot, but when you consider how often you're pressing Keg Smash, this is actually going to do a lot of work for you. Combine that with the passive healing from something like Refreshing Drink here, and it will be healing you a lot. However, we do have something bigger. It wasn't working on these training dummies earlier, so I'm going to do my best to get this one to give it to me. You also have Expel Harm. This move's kind of useless. 5-second cooldown that heals you for almost nothing. It's pretty pathetic. However, when you hit moves such as Blackout Kick or you take damage, you have a chance to summon these Golden Ox Orbs. These Ox Orbs will increase the amount of healing that you receive from that Expel Harm. You'll actually absorb them all when you press it. You can walk over them, by the way, in case you're curious. But at 1 orb, it's not too impressive. But at 3, it's a pretty chunky heal. And again, remember, you have a chance to get bonus healing from those Ox Orbs. Also, you might have noticed it does damage. Yes, it will do damage. I think it's 10% of what it did for healing. You're not using this for its damage, but you are going to use it to heal yourself. Expel Harm is the best button to press when you've taken a large amount of damage and you have the Ox Orbs available. Use that as your first line of staying alive. When you've only lost a little bit of health, you can use Vivify to top yourself off. Just note that as a Brewmaster, you receive 4% increased healing, and because of stagger, you're a really, really easy tank to heal. Like, I actually think healing Brewmaster is one of the easiest tanks in the entire game to heal, until they, they're pushing their limits. And I think that's a pretty important thing for you to know as a player, so that you don't over focus on your healing, but note that you do have some good healing tools here. Also note that, again, 50% of your fire and your nature damage is going to heal you, which is also quite useful. I want to hurt everyone's feelings before you get excited. Rushing Jade Wind does physical damage, not nature damage. I don't know why, but this would be a substantial amount of healing if it was. That being said, if you ever take this node below it, that'll occasionally turn Rushing Jade Wind into a firestorm. That actually does a disgusting amount of damage, and it's fire damage, meaning it will heal you. I just want to get that out of the way, because sometimes it can be exciting to be like, ooh, nature damage, more healing. I'll run the green move. Well, the green move is just physical damage. They hate us. I don't know why they did this. It's so mean. It's so rude. Maybe it's broken. Maybe they tested it and it's like super unfair. This is a weird one. And I know it's going to sound weird, but as a healer main, I need you to know this as your final line of defense. Running away. You might think to yourself, Bowser, that sounds a little silly. Well, Brewmaster happens to be the tank with the most amount of movement. Don't let any warrior or vengeance demon hunter tell you otherwise. You actually have all the movement in the world. Let's go over why this is so important. First of all, in any scenario, if your healer sees you running away, that means you're probably in danger. That means that they can focus on trying to save your life now. Remember, you can ping yourself. You can hit the assist button like you're dying. However, most healers will see a player running for their life and recognize that, oh, my tank is dying. Oh, they're running away. Oh God, right? I need to save them. This in its own right is huge, but Brewmaster has a lot of ways to keep itself safe. First of all, unlike other tanks, you're still going to stagger damage that you take to the back. So if I were to say, get back hit here, I'm still going to get stagger. So I'm not dodging, and that's bad, but otherwise I'm fine. This means that if you're turning your back to enemies to run, you're not likely to just instantly die, like some specs really do struggle with. A lot of the plate classes that need to have block chance will actually really struggle with this, but not you as Brewmaster. You as Brewmaster are going to be able to very easily turn your back and run away. You have a few movement tools, Chi Torpedo and Tiger's Lust to start. Tiger's Lust can be cast on anyone and gives them a 70% increase in speed for 6 seconds, removing all snares and roots. Blech. So use that in combination with like a Chi Torpedo to move a very long distance, and you'll sprint for 30% extra speed for 10 seconds afterwards. So Chi Torpedo and Tiger's Lust will get you running away from mobs. Your leg sweep is a knockdown that'll knock things down in front of you, or around you rather, 10-yard radius, stunning them for 3 seconds. Your Ring of Peace will knock enemies out of the way that are crowd controllable, keeping them away from you or from someone else that you're trying to defend. Finally, you can place your Transcendence, which has a small cooldown, to place a ghost of you. Your Transcendence Transfer is the one with the big cooldown, 45 seconds. It's a 40-yard range, and it'll swap with wherever you dropped that ghost. This is huge, because you can do this. Let's say I drop a Ring of Peace, or let's say I leg sweep the enemy, then I were to drop that Ring of Peace, which is off cooldown, and then I run for my life, maybe throwing some keg smashes during that. I can run around, keep the enemies at bay, really sprint, and then as they start getting close to me, I'm going to be able to teleport back to that ghost, juking them one more time. If you can hit enemies with keg smashes, heal yourself here, and get some of your cooldowns back by throwing said keg smashes and also, running for your life, you might get another round of cooldowns and survive the damage. I'm not kidding. This will save your life. This will save your life in the scariest situations you've ever seen and give you another lease on life. Don't feel bad about running away. I know it sounds very Looney Tunes, it's very silly, but that's something that Brewmaster really excels at. And in a lot of scenarios I've seen Brewmasters start running for their life, they're able to turn the pull around without too much hassle, where sometimes Vengeance Demon Hunter jumps away and then doesn't have the movement to get back in position, or something like Warrior where you have to rely on charges, meaning that after you heroic leap, the only thing you can do is charge right back in or wait for the mobs to approach you. There's also Death Knight, right? Where you just, you're gonna hit Death's Advance and walk away? Like, it's a little scary, but not for Brewmaster. So always remember that you have that available to you. And all of this stuff, if it sounds a little intimidating, isn't too hard to practice. I want to talk about this one more time. I did mention it earlier, for apologies if you're hearing it again. I've made videos on both a tanking guide and a guide on performance anxiety. If you struggle with any of that and tanking is worrying you, please watch them. I put a lot of effort into those videos to really help players understand what they have to do as a tank and to help them deal with that performance anxiety. But the other best way to deal with it is practice pulls. Let me give you the 2 best ways to practice. Yes, you can hit the training dummies. Training dummies are great for practicing your rotation, but you're not going to get that defensive interaction. Delves are fantastic. Valier is a lot better than Bran, but whether it's Valier or Bran helping you out, you're going to be able to set them to healer or DPS. Healer Companion is going to help you stay alive, so you can practice tanking and get your feet wet a little bit safer. Then, when you feel like you understand your tank very well, you can go and play DPS with your companion, or rather have your companion go to DPS, and now it's all on you to survive. This is great for testing things, learning how to do your rotation, figuring out the mistakes you're making in a risk-free environment. Especially with delves, you can bring in a friend too to help you out and like work on maybe managing your friend's DPS as a threat and trying to keep threat off of them. The other big way to practice is the zero pull. Mythic zeros are an excellent way to practice. I'm going to show you some footage from Algathar Academy here, although I was using Priory of the Sacred Flame for a whole lot of my testing back in the War Within. Go and start a pull. It can be as big as you want it to be, and remember, this is going to be unfair, as a lot of this damage isn't meant to go into the tank. Remember, it's supposed to be split across 5 players, the tank taking the brunt of the auto attack damage and some of the tank busters. However, run in, grab some pulls, and limit test yourself, see how far you can go. And it's not about can you survive the pull, it's how long can you survive the pull. Some of these are going to be impossible to survive without an astronomical amount of gear. However, I think this is a great way to practice, and I was actually doing this in Algathar, struggling with the big pull, so I made the big pull smaller, and then I had more success practicing with my kit. And Algathar is nice because you can also just go the other way and get another round of mobs to play with. Not every dungeon is treated equally here, and don't let dying discourage you whatsoever. But the best part about playing tank is that you have the most amount of ways to practice compared to any other spec in the game or role in the game. You always have a way to practice your damage and your healing, your defensives, your routing, everything. It's very, very nice. So get that practice in, and it'll help you get over any performance anxiety that you might have. Okay, this is the part of the video where I feel like if you've learned all of this and you want to go do some pulls, go for it. You have all the knowledge. I've gone over everything you need to know. But now I'm going to go through the rest of the things I didn't talk about in terms of buttons that we have and things we have access to. We're also going to go over some tips and tricks and your stats so that you can help get yourself all geared in the new expansion or wherever you are at midnight or the War Within watching this. There's a lot of buttons on Brewmaster and we did go over them, so we're not going to re-go over any buttons. However, we will go over the CC again. Let's start with Paralysis. It's a 45-second cooldown that locks down the target. Note that you can combine this with a Ring of Peace to move a mob out of the way. This might be useful for some skips that are available to you. Paralysis is otherwise an incapacitate, so any amount of damage is probably going to break the paralysis. However, if you need one more stop to stop a spell cast from killing someone, this is the way to do it. Now, I want to note, because I always need to go over this in these videos, your stop is not your interrupt. So this is a stop. Ring of Peace is technically a stop if the mob can get launched. Leg Sweep is technically a stop if the mob can be stunned, etc., etc. But your Spear Hand Strike is your interrupt. This will jab the target in the throat, interrupting spellcasting and preventing any spell from that school of magic from being cast for 5 seconds. This is why if you Spear Hand Strike a mob that's casting a fireball, they become fire locked and are unable to use fire magic. If they also know frost magic, they will just start casting frost magic, but most mobs, when you hit them with your interrupt and stop a spell cast, will then be forced to walk. This is an important part as a tank for organizing mobs, and it's very important that you know how interrupts work as a tank, as it's pretty pivotal to how you play. If you need additional help moving around mobs, our Provoke will give them a 50% speed boost. Note that all Provoke style moves that taunt the target make you deal increased threat to them. This is why it's very important at the start of a boss fight, you do taunt the boss. If any of your DPSs are just unleashing on the target, you'll maintain threat for a moment where the mob is forced to be looking at you, and then you'll generate 800% threat. I believe tanks passively generate more threat than other targets, so the Provoke is doing a lot of work to ensure that that enemy is looking at you. Combine the movement speed bonus from Hasty Provocations that makes the target run faster, and you can do things like interrupt a mob, taunt them, dash away from them, right? Something like this, where you go, interrupt, taunt, I mashed a button, dash out of the way, and they'll come sprinting towards you. It's very funny, and it's worth learning as a Brewmaster to help organize the pulls a little bit. I mentioned it earlier, but we have Transcendence to drop a ghost, and then transfer will move over. This works basically all the time. However, sometimes you'll get the error text that you can't do it. And the reason is you're crowd controlled, and I don't know why sometimes you can be slowed and not be able to transcendence transfer, but for the most part it should work. It also ignores line of sight, so you can do things like set up a ghost outside of a room, go pull everything in the room, teleport out of the room, and all of the mobs will have to start running towards you outside of the room. Could be very useful as a trick to stay alive. You have a Dispel. All poison and disease effects are removed from the target. 8-second cooldown, costs 10 energy. I always bring this to the party, even if there isn't anything there, because I never want to forget it. But knowing you have a Dispel is important. There can be some really nasty diseases and poisons in the game, so it's just nice to know that you can clear them. You can remove this technically to get another talent point up here, but I just don't like forgetting this talent, so I'm almost always grabbing it just for the sake of never leaving home without it. Ring of Peace will knock out all enemies in the area. They'll be bonked out of the circle. It is radial, so like if I were to put it here, this mob would in theory get launched towards me. So you can use this to kind of organize mobs and launch something into your range, which is quite fun. Also, let's imagine one of your teammates is getting fixated. Putting a Ring of Peace on them, as long as the mob can be crowd controlled, I mean that mob just runs into the wall and bonks off of it. Now, if a mob gets stuck between an object and a Ring of Peace, they'll be allowed like an immunity to the Ring of Peace so they can move through it. And then furthermore, if you position it just right, 2 monks can actually Ring of Peace a mob in between 2 rings, and that will usually not produce the immunity because that is an intended effect. So if you and your Mistweaver or your Windwalker friends want to bonk a mob between 2 Ring of Pieces, honestly, it's a decent amount of crowd control, and it can be nightmare fuel in PvP. But if you're playing Brewmaster in PvP, you're probably a little evil, but also we should be friends. Tiger's Lust. It's the movement ability that we talked about earlier. This is going to be giving you a 70% movement speed boost for 6 seconds, and it removes all roots and snares. However, and which is slows, by the way, if you're new to WoW, that means slows and roots. However, Tiger's Lust does one additional thing. It can be cast on anyone. So you can put it on a teammate if you need them to run faster. And even more importantly, let's say there's a poison or a disease or a magical debuff that's doing damage over time or something. Oh, and it also slows. There's a lot of those that can be cleared with Tiger's Lust. So experiment. If you see that there's a poison on someone and you know it slows them, try putting the Tiger's Lust on them and see if it clears the debuff. Chi Torpedo can be swapped for Roll. This is personal preference. Some people prefer Roll. I prefer Chi Torpedo because I like the sprint afterwards, especially as a tank. You'll run faster for a little bit. This is nice for gathering mobs. However, after you cast Roll or Chi Torpedo, you gain lighter than air. Roll causes you to become lighter than air, allowing you to double jump and dash forward a short distance once within 5 seconds, but it does increase the cooldown of your roll. I like this quite a bit because it's more movement tools, and you can use it to dash in any direction too. It's very nice. During the lighter than air buff, by the way, you can walk on water, just in case you need to know that. Also note that if you were to roll really high in the air and not use your air dash and land on a body of water, you might take a lot of fall damage. And if you're not a Pandaren, it's probably a very lethal amount of fall damage. By the way, I don't know why I'm putting this in this video. If you're ever worried about frozen water from a DK or lighter than air killing you, which it shouldn't realistically ever kill you, if you aim your camera down and hold W, like directly down into the water as you enter it, you will deny the frozen water effect from like Death Knights and whatnot, and you'll actually go under the water. So if you ever need to survive your teammate trolling you, that's how you do that. Welcome to the tank video. I really didn't think I'd be going over that, but it is important for lighter than air, so you get to know it. There's also a couple of cute things in here, like Zen Flight if you would like to fly around on a meditative cloud. Also, you have Mystic Touch. This, any damage you do, literally anything you do, is going to make the target take increased physical damage by 5%. This isn't as strong as Chaos brand on the Demon Hunters. However, it's still quite nice. It's not a bad thing to have on a target, and this is your raid buff, so you will. This is like the raid buff that you bring, so it's good you at least know you have it. I forgot to put this on my bar. Oopsies. Crackling Jade Lightning. So let's talk about Crackling Jade Lightning. This is a ranged attack. It will potentially knock back enemies that are in melee with you. You're not going to be pressing this. There is a talent that makes it do AoE damage and it channels faster, but it has a 60-second cooldown. I don't know if we're ever taking that. I'm going to be honest with you. That being said, it's important to note that you can use Crackling Jade Lightning to just, tag a mob that's in the distance. So if you want to pull this mob, you can just hit them with lightning, right? Kind of get them walking towards you. So it's nice to know you have a range tool for specifically that, but you're never pressing this. Girl, I promise you, you are never pressing this unless you're just tagging a ranged mob, but I figured I'd let you know that it exists. Before we move on to our final section of stats, let's talk a little bit about some tips and tricks about Brewmaster. We've already talked about lighter than air from your dash, letting you walk on water. We've already talked about some of the running around you can do with your movement skills, but here's just a few other things that you might want to know. Do note that if you hit your dodge in the air, you can then air dash. So it doesn't matter that your roll or your chi torpedo is used midair and goes nowhere. You will still gain the ability to air dash. Use that air dash whenever you need it to get around. In Floodgate, I actually used it to walk into these bombs, to launch into the air, to fly to the next floor so I could get there before my DPS did, so that I could get threat on the targets before they walked up and started blasting. I'm really not recommending this, and I cannot recommend this enough. This is easily one of the worst ideas ever, but whenever you take damage, you get stacking dodge chance until your next dodge. But if you turn your back, you can't dodge. This means that you'll eventually get a 100% chance to dodge. This means that you can dodge a specific attack by turning around and forcing the dodge. I'm not recommending this. I'm not recommending this to anyone. You shouldn't do this, but there might be a scenario where there's a boss and they're going to do some giga tank buster and it's going to hurt, but you can take their auto attacks for a little bit to the back and like get your dodge chance ready, and then right when the mob goes to swing the big tank buster, turn towards them and dodge the attack. Maybe it'll clutch a run for you, but I am not taking responsibility if you die doing that, but I have to mention it's here. Black Ox Statue. This move is kind of useless. We don't take it right now, but in case we ever end up in a Tal Dazar again, sometimes there are mobs that like to dash towards a target, right? Pick a random player and dash towards them and start spinning or something, right? Summon Black Ox Statue will give those targets something else to go to that kind of takes priority over your DPS. And then additionally, you can taunt the statue to get mobs to be taunted by you, but I don't know when you use this. There is a bit of a niche use where you can bring this to a dungeon and use this to get a very large taunt off so that all of your team isn't ripping threat off of you, but I hardly think it's worth the talent point. But if you're really struggling with threat at the start of a pull, and you know that like the pugs really like to be a problem, a Black Ox Statue taunt macro you might be able to set up could be a really nice way to quickly get threat on those targets for a few seconds, generate a little extra threat so that the DPS aren't ripping off of you. But I don't even take it. None of us really take it because it's only so good. But it does have its use cases, and I figured I'd let it be known here. All right, let's quickly go over stats. Note that I'm not going to provide a best in slot list. This is going to be very thrown together, and that's just so you can get started. Best in slot lists are a little misleading, and a lot of players will just follow them like a Bible, but the problem is you really need to know what your stats are doing for you, not just blindly going after what somebody told you is best. And realistically, there's like a bazillion gear combinations that are going to be unbelievably viable and incredibly strong. So try not to overstress about the best gear options. Also, if you look at my gear, it's a lot of PvP stuff. That's just because in the beta, it instantly scales in dungeons to the correct item level, so I can use it to very quickly get into dungeons and test things, so I'm not going to recommend you run PvP stuff. Agility is your main stat. Reminder, you can equip intelligence weapons and you really don't want to, so make sure your weapon has agility on it. The more weapon damage and the more agility, the more item level your weapon has, the more damage you're going to do. So I always try to go for item level when it comes to main pieces of gear, non-tier set pieces of gear, and weapons. For all things secondary stats, remember that your jewelry is the stuff that will move your secondary stats the most, and that trinkets are oddball, and that sometimes your best trinkets might not provide you the secondaries you're looking for, and sometimes you want more secondary stats out of your trinkets, but you have like a defensive trinket. That's fine. Trinkets and jewelry are the slots that get the most amount of play, so to say, so just know that it can get a little ugly in there, and that's fine. As for jewelry, I like to make sure I'm getting as much crit and versatility as possible. These are roughly even, and then I think crit is slightly more useful than versatility. I haven't done the math on this. I tend to value versatility more as a player, as I like the raw damage and of course the defensive element to it, but try to get as much crit and versatility as possible. Crit doubles something, so your heals and your damage will be doubled, but you have a few extra effects in Brewmaster. Blackout Kick can grant you elusive brawler stacks, your mastery, and a critical strike will grant you 2 stacks of it. So higher crit chance means more likely to get 2 stacks of elusive brawler and a blackout kick. You also have increased critical damage on your blackout kicks here with Vigilant Watch. This means that if you land a crit, it'll do 30% more damage. Blackout kick does a lot of damage, so landing crits is a good thing. Finally, remember that we have Celestial Fortune. You have a chance equal to your critical strike value to receive 70% additional healing. This is unbelievably powerful and part of the reason why you're easier to heal than other tanks. So I highly recommend you make sure to dip into your crit and into your versatility. However, mastery isn't a bad stat. I don't tend to stat for mastery, but don't fear extra mastery on your gear, as it does increase your attack power. It increases that stacking chance to dodge. That's your mastery percentage, but you get so much of this baseline you don't really need anymore. And if you do have a lot of mastery over, say, versatility, the problem is you're dodging a lot, but when you do get hit, that isn't getting mitigated at all. So that's why I tend to value versatility. Versatility, for those of you who don't know, increases your damage by the percentage and decreases damage taken by half. This means right now I'm dealing 15% increased damage and I'm taking 7.5% reduced damage. Versatility is kind of a double dip on Brewmaster, as yes, you're going to do more damage, but also when you do take damage, it goes through your versatility, so therefore it's protecting you. Then it gets staggered. This means that it's really, really, really useful to have a high amount of versatility. So that's why I weight it over mastery and why crit and versatility are rather neck and neck. The one thing that we can try to avoid is haste. Now, haste only provides you cooldown reduction on the moves with green text on them, such as, say, Purifying Brew here, but it never provides enough value that it's worth it on Brewmaster. So here's my advice. Try to roll with as little haste as possible. If you do get a lot of haste from something, or say you're coming from Mistweaver and you have a lot of extra haste in your gear, it's totally fine. Stagger is so powerful that at lower levels, you can get away with the wrong stat weights and start to gear. But as you get the more optimal gear that has the stat weights that you're looking for, you're going to find that it provides you a significant boost to your survivability as you enter harder content. Oh, and we've finally made it to the end. This guide is longer than I intended it to be, but tanks are a lot to chew, and I find that they are a bit difficult, so there's a lot to go through. Feel free to backpedal and go over any section you want additional information on. And of course, please practice in delves, practice in Mythic Zero pulls. Give yourself a lot of practice, because realistically, getting comfortable with your rotation, getting comfortable with your defensives will make any kind of performance anxiety or worries you might have of playing with other players significantly easier to get over. That being said, if you have any other questions, let me know down in the comment section, hit me up on Discord in my server, or stop on by with chat. Even if I'm playing healer or other specs, I'm always down to talk Brewmaster. It's my absolute favorite tank. I hope you enjoy the heck out of it as well, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, friends.